Welcome back to the Wild Rose Moon's Moonlight series featuring the talent that surrounds us all. Tonight we have Duncan Mitchel joining us along with our host, John Baylor. I am Ryan Muir. Off we go into the moonlight.
Well, thank you for joining us for Moonlight. I'm here with Duncan Mitchel, and Duncan is quite an accomplished and well-rounded writer. He's written poetry and music, book reviews for newspapers, film reviews for websites, just kind of been all over the place. And we're going to be taking a look tonight at the poetry of Duncan Mitchel. I think I'm just going to have you jump right into one before any further introduction. This will be a poem called Respectability.
Okay. My hair cut short, a tie around my neck, a jacket on, I wander to and fro. All this procures a somewhat larger check, but how much further will I choose to go? A little at a time I disappear, but whether from the edge or within I couldn't say. Am I becoming clear, or is it rather that I'm wearing thin? I may say I'm really not like this. It's just a role I play, a mask I wear. But then I poke beneath the artifice a little fearfully. Am I still there? So far it doesn't hurt when I negate myself. But how long till I dissipate?
Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you.
Through the poem, there's this wearing out, this dissipating of the person, and the dissipation happens because of respectability, the pursuit of it. On some of these, you gave me a date of when you wrote this one. I'm curious when this poem is from in your life.
This would be from 1979 or 80. That was when I switched from being a janitor and dishwasher to being a low-level supervisor in food services at Indiana University. And I was partly looking for a bigger check, but also a lot of people were saying to me, you shouldn't be a janitor, you should be white collar, you should be something better. And I was always very ambivalent about that. One friend who looked at my poems in those days said, "Do you want me to tell you how ambivalent this poem is?" And of course, ambivalence is probably one of the main themes of just about everything I wrote in those days and still. So that was about what it felt like to be a supervisor, to be highly visible, but also invisible because people saw the position and not me. Mm-hmm. And oddly, as a blue collar worker, I felt more visible, more myself.
Yeah, right. Now you mentioned pursuing that different position because other people felt like you should be. As much as the poem, of course, is about the regrets, but was there a part of you that also felt you should be doing this?
Yes, that's why. The main thing though was just wanting a little more money, and one of the odd things about it was that I realized I was only making about $5 a week more than I was as a janitor, and it wasn't worth the hassle.
Yeah.
But part of me was going, I should be doing something else. I would have been 28, 29, and I was still questioning what I was going to be, who I was. And so it was a combination of other people's encouragement. I wouldn't say pressure.
Yeah, okay.
But, and pressure from myself, feeling that I should be doing something classier.
Mm-hmm. And that's a few years in the past now. So how did you deal with that pressure? How did that story unfold?
It was actually very easy to get out. There were a lot of people who were kind of horrified and shocked that I would choose to step down rather than to try to climb up. Mm-hmm. And so I would tell them, well, I'll have more time to read and write. And okay, that's good. Duncan's going to have more time to write. That's good. And that was a factor, but I just wanted to be in a more comfortable space.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I really did a lot more writing after that.
Right. A comfortable space, but that's the comfortable answer that you could give people.
Yes, and it was comfortable for them.
Yeah, right.
And so I was probably most productive in terms of writing nonfiction in my 50s. And that's kind of weird because I was still working full time, but it just kind of poured out again.
So when you got out of that position, where was it that you wound up professionally?
I went back to, I became the dishwasher and janitor both at another dormitory. For anyone who has been to IU, I was working at Collins Living Learning Center, and it had an artsy, hippie, kind of bohemian reputation. And I was working with a lot of the students who worked as student workers in the cafeteria. So I felt a lot more comfortable than I had there, just as a place to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I settled in there and stayed 30 years.
Yeah.
So that was
A good
that
decision.
worked. That worked.
Yeah.
I would tease people and say, obviously, this is in my genes.
Yeah. Right.
I was born to wash dishes.
Yeah. We said before the cameras were rolling, George said something like you cut a big figure. You've been here just for a year, and all of us saw that you'd written that in your bio, and we thought, no, it has to be longer than that, just because you've made your presence known. I mean, like not in the sense of like being loud and visible or anything, but when you've been here reading poetry in the open mics, we've been engaged in it. It felt like we didn't have to have a year of build up in order to understand who you are and where you're coming from. But one open mic, reading a couple of your poems, and we get a great sense of that.
Oh, that's great.
So I guess that means that we feel like we've known you for longer.
Well, I feel like I've always known Plymouth, and I had been wanting to move back here when I retired for a long time. It took me a while to do that, but Plymouth is where my earliest memories are, and I feel connected here in a way that I only feel otherwise to Bloomington. And Bloomington I was in for 47, 48 years, and we moved out of Plymouth when I was 8, but still kept coming back, and I still feel connected. So it's really like coming home in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you mentioned earliest memories, and it's strange that the power those have in a person's life, the importance of those earliest memories. And I can certainly understand that pull to go back to where those memories came from. I guess since we're on that subject, then I'll ask you. You said you wrote your first poem when you were in second grade.
Yeah.
I'm just curious to hear whatever you can tell me about your very, very early experiences in poetry.
Well, that was easy. We got some basic poetry in elementary school. I do not remember why I decided to write one. I read somewhere about the Mexican volcano Popocatépetl, and I wrote an awful doggerel poem that what little I can remember of it pains me.
Yeah.
But that was it. That was the first one, and I don't think I wrote another one for a long time. But I could be wrong. At any rate, that's what I remember, and sitting there in the classroom actually, and writing it on the spot.
When I think of my older things that I've written, I can come up with all the things that are embarrassing about them, but there's still something very dear to me about that poetry from a young age. So I could insult it, but I suspect you mention it because there's still a fondness of the act.
Well, I think it's just partly that I'm pleased that I can remember it.
Yeah,
it's not something which was something I just drifted into. It was something I very deliberately did at the age of 8.
Mm-hmm. And you took a few years off of writing poetry, and then you drifted back into it.
Now, it might be that I wrote other little bits of things, but it wasn't until the end of high school that I began again, at least as far as poems I can remember and poems that I've preserved.
It sounded like your high school experience is sort of a like creative coming of age in your life. What are some of your creative pursuits that you got into in high school and some of your writing experiences?
I started learning to play guitar in 8th grade, and played in front of school assembly, I think in my sophomore year. And lately I've been running into people from high school who remember not only that I played, but what I played, which was Mr. Tambourine Man by Bob Dylan.
Mm-hmm.
Dylan had a big influence on me. Maybe not for the good, I don't know. But that was probably, I began writing verse poetry again under his influence, the idea of writing songs. And then I was also much interested in, I was always a voracious reader since kindergarten, really. My mom taught me to read, and once I started, I never looked back. And I read very widely. And in high school, I kind of taught myself literary modernism with a little encouragement from some of my teachers. My French teacher in high school pushed me towards Sartre and Camus and people like that. And I read some of that, sometimes mostly in French, but also in English. But also, there was a big anthology of modern English and modern American poetry edited by Louis, I should say. And that I just kind of went through, and whenever I found something I liked, I copied it out by hand. I didn't memorize much, but I just kind of swallowed up huge amounts, huge quantities of poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of pushed me also. That kind of was something I was collecting data, collecting ideas, and also models of what poetry was. So it was all kind of building up till my senior year. I'd written a couple of not bad, but not particularly impressive poems. I'd been kind of like, one was kind of like an imitation of Gerard Manley Hopkins, the 19th century Jesuit poet, very eccentric. But then I read Immanuel Velikovsky's book about wasn't Earth in Upheaval. It was one of his kind of pseudoscientific books about the planets of the solar system kind of wandering around, Venus nearly colliding with the Earth. And he tried to read his theories about that into the Bible, particularly, and into ancient history. And it was reading that suddenly gave me the idea for the first really good poem I wrote.
Well,
and that was Règne Animal, which I've read
okay.
So that was, and then I didn't write a whole lot after that, but I went to IU South Bend, entered that poem in a university writing contest, and came in second. One of the faculty judges said he thought it was the best poem entered in the competition, and so I took a creative writing contest, creative writing class, and went from there to. Then I began writing in quantity again, writing a lot. The class doesn't necessarily make you write, but it certainly opened me up to doing it a lot.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, since you mentioned the poem, you've got that one here, right?
Yeah, I do. One moment.
Yeah, and if there's anything else you'd like to say to introduce it, then go for
Okay,
it.
well, the Règne Animal means animal kingdom, and I got that from the title of a book that Velikovsky mentioned in a footnote, and I liked that that phrase, and I went from there. I'm not sure why or how I connected it. Maybe it was the idea. Well, shall I start reading and see? Get
Sure.
that across?
See, maybe you'll discover the reason why you're.
Oh,
reading.
I can guess actually, but first I should read the poem.
Okay.
This Yahweh is a devil, murmured Pharaoh, holding his dead son's body in his arms. The little boy who would never wear the crown of the two kingdoms, who would never again wade naked in sun-jeweled waters, while the sun made his soft skin shine like gold, the skin that now was pale and cold, the slender limbs, once graceful as a cat, that now stiffened as the grieving father held them, the eyes dark as a deer's, now glazing until the father wept and closed them gently. In the next room, the women howled and scattered dust in their hair and tore their clothes for the child's soul that now prepared for its journey to the western land. Born of the gods he was, a god he was, and gone to join his holy brethren. A devil, repeated Pharaoh as he looked out at the stars, and these his people are poison in my kingdom. For who but a devil would kill a Pharaoh's son? And what but poison would bring such a pestilence upon the land? In all the houses of Pharaoh's kingdom there was lament this night. Many young bodies lay like wood effigies, while the wails of their parents rose around them. Dreams were smashed like blown eggshells. Lives had been rewarded in brass instead of gold, in tin instead of silver. Poison and a devil, murmured Pharaoh, his mind dark with pain. The stars were small, mean pinpricks in an eternity of blackness. Rise, my people, rise, cried the demagogue, for we are freed from bondage. And like maggots squirming in a corpse, they rose. Now, that was, obviously, kind of a retelling of the Exodus story from the point of view of the Egyptians. And I think that was the idea I got from Velikovsky. And animal kingdom, Règne animal, implies looking at us from a very high, divine, objective point of view, and seeing us as the small creatures that we are, but at the same time recognizing that everybody is important to themselves. Everybody is the center of the universe for themselves. And that's how I would explicate what the poem is about.
Yeah. You got a number of biblical poems. Is this the first of those? It sounds like an early part of your writing story.
It was, yeah. And then that was the end of that for another 7 or 8 years. I stuck to more personal stuff, but I picked that up again in the late 70s.
And did you pick it up again with this poem in mind, or
no? As you'll see, I jumped around a lot.
Yeah.
In time, and I should also add that I recognize now that this poem had a lot of the Règne animal has the influence of Miko Waltari's novel The Egyptian, which was made into a kind of overpriced B movie in the 50s with Tyrone Power. And I found the book and read it, and a lot of the voice and the tone, I think, and some of the details, my picture of ancient Egyptian life comes from the book.
Well, we'll get into I think a few more of those biblical poems before we're done.
Oh yeah.
But I want to shift to another poem of yours, and I also want to ask if George can move the chair that's in front of the clock, because I can't see how we're doing on our time. But to refer back to your first poem again, you had this sense of loss of self and of giving up of self. And there was another poem of yours that has that same loss of self, but the cause of it, I think, is a very different one. And the poem is called Husbandry.
Ah, yes. So that one, you ready for that one?
Yeah.
Okay. If you will plant me on your windowsill and shine your gentle face on me each morning, you may shape my growth to please yourself, and I will do my best to like it. I will hold still while you trim me with the scissors, clipping my oddness away, like the gardeners who produce trees in the shapes of hearts and chickens. But somewhere inside, I can't help it, I will nurture secretly the wild growth, the craziness you can't prune away.
Now, I guess it's just the title that makes me interpret this as, I don't know if a love poem would be quite the right word, but I imagine the pruner to be a woman who has a better idea of what the man wants. And again, the title of it was Husbandry, and maybe that's informing me. Of course, husbandry can just be caring for plants as well.
Exactly, and that's a conscious play.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes I've called the poem marriage. Sometimes, husbandry is more the play that I wanted to put on it.
Right.
It fits better.
Yeah. And so, I guess that is the idea then, that this is a marriage relationship, or a relationship between man and woman. Now, I guess I'll ask it: is this in the first poem that we looked at? There were positive reasons for taking this job, and then there were costs that came along with it. Is there that same sort of mixed perspective on this here, or is this more about the consequences?
I should say that this is not literally about a marriage. It's just about really, it's not even addressed to one particular person. It's about my failures in relationships at that time, and the recognition that something in me just did not want to settle down. I mean, there was a whole genre of pop songs in the 60s, Baby the Rain Must Fall, stuff like that, about men who just didn't want to be tied down. And this, again, is ambivalent. The feeling that rather than seeing this as the wonderful thing about me as a man, I've got to be me, blah, 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 but rather it's also a failure in me of letting my partner down, and the recognition of what that may mean.
That take on it is a little bit surprising to me, because so much of it sounds like it's about the pruning act of the other rather than the weakness of yourself.
Well, I noticed in other people I knew too that long-term relationships, people shape each other. It's said, for example, that people who've been married for a long time start to look alike. Things like that were in my mind, and the idea that that's just kind of inevitable, and it's not a bad thing.
Right.
And it could easily have been about a haircut, but yeah, I was kind of one, and it may be that one of the failures of the poem is that it doesn't. I didn't get in my willingness to go along with that, the willingness to be pruned down into the shape of hearts and chickens.
Yeah.
And that this would make me a work of art in some way, perhaps.
Right.
Like a topiary, and but it was just more. It really is about is about resisting that. And again, I think it works because it's not just me. I mean, it fits in with that whole genre of a man's got to do what a man's got to do kinds of things.
Right.
But it's also about part of me wanted to be coupled, but part of me also was recognizing that I didn't want to be coupled.
I don't know if I would go so far as to say that's a weakness in the poem. I wasn't raising a criticism when I mentioned that your surprising interpretation of it, because you can't capture the whole of human experience in one poem.
Yeah.
But you say part of you wanted to go along with that, and part of you wanted to resist it, and you've captured in this particular poem.
Well, so that's good.
The part that wants to go against it.
I'm not sure. I wasn't sure that, and I'm still not sure reading it that I got in how much I wanted it or thought I wanted it.
Yeah. I will say just my take as a reader on this one. In respectability, I felt like there is a problem with the giving up of yourself. And in this poem, I also felt there is a problem with the giving up of yourself. But in this one, where what you close with comes across as a positive value in the sense of the wild growth. So I guess the last three lines: I will nurture secretly the wild growth, the craziness you can't prune away. Not necessarily in defiance of the pruner, but to say that there will continue to be a part of me that is me and that is true and honest.
Though I'm not sure. One reason I use the word craziness and the wild growth, is to say this is to again make it at least ambivalent. That it's not necessarily something I'm behind or accepting.
Right.
It's just something that keeps emerging, no matter how much it's clipped and trimmed.
Right. And part of you is behind it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
And we've got just a couple minutes more before we take a break and come back for another segment. I think we'll go ahead and just try to get another poem in here, if that's all right. Now, I had a few that I listed off, but I'll let you choose one if there's whether you want to pick one of those or whether you want to go with something else on this one.
Well, let's see. This is maybe after some rather draggy, downbeat poems about relationships. Here's
I was going to keep you going draggy and downbeat with the ones I picked. But
if you don't mind, I'll just
no, that's great.
Something different. This one is maybe the wild growth and the craziness I was talking about. We seem ungainly, yes, but whales embrace, and in their element, where side by side they court with tenderness and weightless grace, they wear their massive bulks with joy and pride. Cast out on land, love falls from grace. Their meat couples with gasping meat, monstrosity grapples with gross monstrosity, and heat shrivels the heart with thirst for ecstasy. But in the water, love is cool as shade, and whales embrace while leaping into air brief as a gasp, and courting hippos wade in pairs. Our parents touched each other where they taught us only animals would touch. We need feel no disgrace compared with such.
So reaching for that restored relationship, the one where everything works, I guess.
You could say, yeah.
Yeah.
But also just the, it's more just about the whole idea of the validity of sexual love. That the hatred of the body that turns up in, I think in all cultures at some point or another, in places or another. And the kind of, I was very much interested in also the hatred and fear of transience, the fact that flesh doesn't last, and therefore it's despicable because it is transient. And in this poem, I wanted to celebrate transience, but also the animalistic associations of the body were also good things.
Yeah.
And everybody thinks whales are cool. Everybody loves them. And somewhere I had read about how when whales copulate, they leap up out of the water into the air. And I just thought that was an incredible image that kind of goes, if that's how animals do it, we should be more like animals.
You made a mention of all cultures, but I think you can extend that in a way that adds maybe even more importance and more relevance to the poem, and say that it would be true of all people, that you would have that sort of resistance of hatred or resistance of the functions of the body.
I wouldn't say all people any more than everybody in one culture. And I think that every culture I know about is ambivalent about the body.
Right.
On the one hand, it's transient, it decays, it fails us. I think at this time I had just been reading Dorothy Dinnerstein's great book, The Mermaid and the Minotaur, which is also about the way we try to split ourselves into the flesh and the spirit or the mind, and why it doesn't work, and why at the same time it's not surprising that we are ambivalent about our bodies, because they do fail us. They break down. They are vulnerable to pain. They eventually they die. And Dinnerstein wrote about that with great beauty, which is kind of amazing for an academic. It's a great book and had a tremendous influence on me. And I think that it is one of the crucial influences behind this poem.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing your work, Duncan. We're going to get you back on here.
Great. Thank you.
For another set before too long. So don't go anywhere. We're coming back on at 8 o'clock with a number more poems from Duncan, and we got some good stuff lined up for you. And a special thanks to Encore. They're a new sponsor of this program, Encore Performing Arts, here in Plymouth. And I'm not usually the guy that does all this, along with Gibson Insurance and the Gibson Foundation. So a big thank you to all of our sponsors for all the help that you are and for making this program possible.
This has been another episode of Wild Rose Moon's Moonlight series. We got to thank our sponsors, Gibson Foundation, Gibson Insurance, Marshall County Community Foundation, Marshall County Tourism, and Encore Performing Arts Center for making this possible. You can also go to wildrosemoon.com and help support us by donating whatever you can. Behind the scenes, also to help make this happen, is George Schricker, John Baylor, Howard Gibb, Matt Bergmoser, Jennifer Reed. I am Ryan Meir. Thank you, and we'll see you in a little bit for the second part, Duncan Mitchel's Moonlight series.